Yes, sir. That's Ireland. Boy, I'll never forget the day we came off Belfast Lock there. There were 4,000 of us in the first convoy, with plenty more to come. On leave and duty, there must have been 250,000 young Americans busting into Ireland from 1942 on. And green? Boy, I'll say, why, we were as green as Ireland. Most of us thought Ulster was a kind of long overcoat, instead of the old historical name for the 9 counties in the north of Ireland, including Donegal, Cavan, and Monaghan. But today, Ulster is generally used to mean the 6 counties of North Ireland. Londonderry, usually shortened to Derry, Antrim, Fermanagh, Tyrone, Armagh, and County Down, the counties that naturally group around Belfast. That was where we got off the boat, Belfast. Boy, that was some occasion. We were the first foreign army in Ireland since the French tried to horn in on the fight between King William of England and ex-King James II of the same territory. The place we landed was Pollock Dock, and the first American ashore was Private Milburn Hink of Hutchinson, Minnesota. Needless to say, he was a pretty proud lad. In front of the City Hall in the main square of Belfast, they put up a monument to the GI landing. Just a plain round stone with a date round the top. January 26, 1942. And the insignia of the American Army, Navy, and Marines. This monument was the first thing General Ike Eisenhower took a look at when he came to Belfast to receive the freedom of the city. He was welcomed by the Lord Mayor, Sir Crawford McCulloch, and went on into the City Council chamber to receive the silver casket containing the scroll commemorating his election to be an honorary burgess of the capital city of Ulster. But that was after the war. The time I was speaking of was January 1942, when a GI in Belfast stood out like a sore thumb, and too many people seemed to drive on the wrong side of the street. I remember stopping by a bookstore one day, and there was one book in the window took my eye immediately, because it seemed to be some kind of account of the country, though the title didn't exactly warn a guy away from it. It had a swell line of local pictures in it, and I began to think I was a kind of Columbus in reverse, American discovering Ireland. Nice piece of Irish history you have there.
American history. That's Carrickfergus Castle, and it's meant a lot to America. For instance, the parents of one of the greatest presidents of the United States, President Andrew Jackson, were born and raised within sight of that castle. They actually sailed to America from that old quay beside it, about 200 years ago.
Are you kidding?
No, no. Come here, I'll show you. I want you to see a little village called Bonnybefore, home of the parents of Andrew Jackson, 7th President of the United States. This is the stream from which the President's mother dipped up the water she needed for drinking, cooking, and washing. Today, there is the added convenience of a pump. Beyond it is a typical Irish cottage of exactly the age and type of the home of President Jackson's parents. Only the thatch of this home is of our time. The rest was built before Washington was born. The Jackson home was pulled down to make way for this railroad track. 250,000 GIs on leave or duty have ridden over this spot on their way between Larne Harbour and Belfast. When the track was laid, the Jackson home was broken up, and one of the windows was bought by a neighbour across the street, name of McGill, the father of the present owner, John McGill here, who is 82 years of age. This is the window with a small rushlight beside it of the kind Mrs. Jackson had to rely on for illumination. The window looks out on what used to be a shebeen, a local drinking saloon. The oldest inhabitant of Bonnybefore is Mrs. Hopkins, whose family has lived in this cottage for 200 years. She herself is 93 and her great-grandmother used to tell her how the Jacksons sailed to America, with the usual epilogue of how well they did there.
Well, okay. But you can't make a book out of one isolated coincidence of Irish and American history.
Isolated? Did you say isolated? Man alive, there's been a two-way traffic up and down that loch. You sent us 250,000 GIs to be the temporary guests of Ulster. 200 years before that, we sent you 500,000 Ulstermen to live permanently in America. From Belfast in the middle of the 18th century, as many as 1,000 families a week were emigrating to America. In one short period of 5 years, 43,000 Ulster folk took sailing ships to America from Newry in the County Down, Larne on the Antrim coast above Belfast, Coleraine in the river port in the north of County Derry, Londonderry in the same county, Strabane in the County Tyrone, and from the neighbouring port of Lifford in the County Donegal and now a part of Eire. From old villages like this, whole populations left for the Americas. From old churches of the type of this one in Bruchshane, whole congregations followed their ministers out to the new land across the Atlantic. A mile or two from Bruchshane Church is a memorial of special interest. Quaintly situated amongst the cornfields, it was erected to the Houston family. From them originated Sam Houston, great general of the Texan War with Mexico and first president of the Republic of Texas. This is Willie Houston, sole remaining member of the family in the district. He has a son, another Sam Houston, who was a medical student in Edinburgh. The Houston Memorial stands in the shadow of Slanish, the queer-shaped mountain where in his early days St. Patrick was a swineherd. It's a strange twist of the shamrock to locate in the same piece of Irish soil the origins of the patron saint of Ireland and of the father of the state of Texas. Of all the towns of Ulster, quite the most remarkable effect on American history and through America on world history was contributed by the old town of Strabane in the County Tyrone. From this beautifully situated town on the banks of the River Mourne came 3 Ulster people who helped to change the fate of the world. One was John Dunlap, the printer of the American Declaration of Independence. The other 2 were a young engaged couple, Annie Mills and James Wilson, who, after sailing to America, were to become the grandparents of the greatest idealist the White House has ever known, President Woodrow Wilson. By a remarkable coincidence, both John Dunlap and James Wilson went to work in the same place, the old printing shop of the Gray family, master printers in Strabane for 250 years, but whose present shop in High Street has only been in operation since 1760. Down the alley at the back of the shop went the printers' apprentices, John Dunlap and James Wilson. The alley itself has not been changed since the 18th century, when their work lay up those stairs, in the loft above, where printing is still done, and where President Wilson's grandfather himself would find no change, except a newfangled gas lamp for illumination, and one new machine to assist the old press on which Dunlap and Wilson learned to print. This old press on which they worked is still in operation. Here it is, and exactly as in their day, it is still used for printing local posters. It was on this machine that John Dunlap, the Irish immigrant, learned the craft which later enabled him to print the American Declaration of Independence, the charter of a new course for democracy. Of the 8 Ulster signatures on the Declaration of Independence, the most notable are those of John Hancock, President of Congress, whose people came from the County Down, and of Charles Thompson, Secretary of Congress, who came from the little Ulster town of Machara. But from Strabane, so many Irishmen sailed away to America that a long-forgotten harper put the pain of it all into a song. It is a song full of the sad thoughts of an immigrant who gained a new home across the ocean, only at the cost of losing the girl he loved. If I were king of Ireland and all things at my will, I'd roam through recreation, new comforts to find still. But the comfort I would seek the most, you all may understand, is to win the hand of Martha. She's the flower of sweet Strabane. If I had you, lovely Martha, away in Inishowen, or in some lonely valley in the wild woods of Tyrone, I would do my whole endeavour and try to work my plan, to feast my eyes and gain my prize, my flower of sweet Strabane. But farewell to bonny Lifford, where the sweet morn waters flow, and likewise unto my brown-haired girl, since I from her must go. As down Loch Foyle the waters boil, and my ship it stands out from the land, I would say farewell, and God bless you now, my flower of sweet Strabane. Downriver from Strabane is the ancient city of Londonderry, better known to Irishmen as Derry. From Derry in the early 18th century, thousands of Ulster families sailed to America to found a new Londonderry in the state of New Hampshire. From the Ulster stock in that new Londonderry came many men famous in American history. General Reed, who was with Washington at Valley Forge, General James Miller, and Major Robert Rogers of the famous Rogers Rangers. All these and many more sprang from folk who sailed from these docks and quays of Derry, where technicians of the United States Navy have lately added more than 3 miles of new docks to this port, which was one of the source springs of their own American liberty. Beyond Derry is Culmore Point, and beyond that the open sea and the American continent if you turn left. But if you turn right, you come to the mouth of the River Bann, the famous Bann which rises in the Mourne Mountains and flows through the length of Ulster. There's an old song about the River Bann, as there is about most Irish rivers, but curiously enough, this is not about a man's sad departure, but about a man's arrival. It must have found an echo in many American hearts. When first to this country a stranger I came, I placed my affection on a maid that was young. She being fair and tender, her waist small and slender, kind nature had formed her for my overthrow. Now since I have gained her, I'm contented forever. I put rings on her fingers and gold in her ears, and there on the flowery banks of the lovely Bann River, in all sorts of splendor, I will live with my dear. From the river port of Coleraine sailed many Ulster folk who became famous in America. Amongst them were some country people from a little farm near Dervock, a few miles south of Coleraine. The Dervock farm is the ancestral home of President William McKinley, the president who guided the United States of America into their happy association with the Philippines and with the island of Guam in the Pacific, islands which were to prove so vital to world freedom in our time. Time has handed over the ancestral home of the McKinleys to the cows and the hens. The furnishings and all the inside of the house were sold to America, down to the floors, the ceilings, and the bricks of the fireplaces. and with the money thus obtained, this new grey house was built beside the old one. From nearby Cullibaccy, also in the County Antrim, another Ulster farmer left to try his luck in America, and in the event became the father of another United States President, Chester Alan Arthur. The bedroom window in the old farmhouse is exactly as it was when the father of the President looked out of it for the last time before he sailed for America. The present owner of this house is Joseph Wright Simpson, seen here with his grandson and his dogs. Half a mile across the Irish countryside is the home of the nearest living relative of President Arthur, who still lives in Ireland, a Mrs. Kenny. She is a cousin of President Arthur, for her grandmother and the President's mother were sisters. In her younger days, Mrs. Kenny was a pillar of the local dramatic society. You'll notice in a moment how she leaves us. When Mrs. Kenny never goes away, she makes an exit. But in any Irish man, woman or girl, that's not really surprising, for in Ireland, entertainment talent is quite common. It was because of this that throughout the war, ENSA, the National Service Entertainment Organisation, was able to keep 12 companies going in Ulster. Here, at the back of some ENSA billets, an artist is practicing an old song, the Inniskilling Dragoon. This song was written in praise of the famous Ulster regiment of a famous Ulster town, Enniskillen, the lakeland beauty spot of Northern Ireland. The words tell of an enlisted man who went to fight abroad, to leave the fair waters and green isles of his native land. A beautiful damsel of fame and renown, a gentleman's daughter from Monaghan town, as she rode by the barracks, this beautiful maid, sure she stood on her coach to see the dragoons on parade. Very well, Enniskillen, I leave you a while, and all your fair waters, and every green isle. When the wars they are over, we'll return in full bloom, and they'll all welcome home their Enniskillen dragoon. One of the most popular songs in Ireland is not Irish at all, but old Southern American. It traveled in a letter back home from Texas, USA. There's a yellow rose in Texas that I'm a-going to see. No other darky knows her, no darky, only me. She sighed so when I left her, it nearly broke my heart. And if we ever meet again, we never more shall part. She's the sweetest rose of color that the Starkey ever knew. Her eyes, they shine like diamonds, they sparkles in the dew. You may talk about your dearest maid, or sing of Rosalie, but the yellow rose of Texas beats the bells of Tennessee. She's the sweetest rose of color that the Starkey ever knew. Her eyes, they shine like diamonds, they sparkle in the dew. You may talk about your dearest maid, or sing of Rosalie, but the yellow rose of Texas beats the bells of Tennessee. But modern Ulster is not all white cottages and cornfields, nor all ancient historical buildings and quaint traditional dances. Modern Ulster is also a powerful industrial unit, producing every year more than $400 million worth of goods for export, including 10,000 tons of rope and wire hawsers, 10 million yards of twine, more than $80 million worth of linen, $12 million worth of machinery, and more than $100 million worth of new ships. Northern Ireland, with a population of 1.25 million people, has an external trade of over £200 million per annum, the equivalent of more than $800 million. So it's hardly surprising that except on high days and holidays, there's always a haze over the city of Belfast. Yes, sir, that's Ireland.
Yeah? Well, you may be right. But I don't think you've said the half of it. Okay, I did like you said. I took an interest in the history. And I can even show you something you didn't tell me. This here is the house where the Stonewall Jackson family came from. It's a house called Garden Lodge in the small town of Hollywood in the County Down, about 10 miles from Belfast. And the road where the great Southern American general's family lived is still called Jackson's Road. But all this is history. And to us GIs, Ireland means more than what you can find in the art galleries, in the museums, and in the old historical records. The link there is between Ireland and America was not just forged by the ancestors of 4 American presidents, even if they were Andy Jackson, Chester A. Arthur, William McKinley, and the great Woodrow Wilson, or by any number of Irish-American notabilities. There's a lot in that, but there's a lot more to it than that. Remember, I saw the way these people took General Ike. And I'm not talking about hero worship, though there was plenty of that. And I'm not talking about official welcomes, however sincere. I'm talking about the way the Irish folk wanted to clap Ike on the back and shake him by the hand. I'm talking about the way they have an Ulster of getting down to cases. It was the same at the ball games we used to organize at Ravenhill Park in Belfast. Our own big shots came as a matter of course. That's General Hartle, who commanded in North Ireland. Naturally, the GI fans came. You'd expect them to. But the Irish people came too, by the thousand, to a game they didn't understand, being played by people they didn't know. The Irish came because we were having fun. And that's the way you'll always find these people, having fun. Boy, they've got warm hearts, these people. Oh, I know what I'm talking about. You see, I won one for myself. Her name is Molly, and she comes from Larne, where we were married. More than 1,100 GIs married Irish girls in the 4 years we were there. And I guess those 1,100 anyway have an idea what I'm trying to say. I remember the farewell night of the American forces in Ireland. There was a party at the Red Cross Club in Belfast. The first American Red Cross Club opened in Europe, and the last to close. It was brilliantly run by Mrs. Marcia Mackey, an American woman married to an Ulsterman. General Robinson is congratulating her on it, and so he should. There was a whole raft of generals there, come to hand back to Ireland the keys of Langford Lodge, the first U.S. air base in Ulster. General Houghton was there, commanding the U.S. Tactical Air Force, and General Strong, who took over in Ireland, and General Koenig, commander of the United Kingdom base. But the guest of the evening was Sir Basil Brooke, Prime Minister of the Northern Ireland government. And in the speech he made that night, he put what I've been trying to say in a nutshell. He said this:
So many Ulstermen have gone to America that it was only natural that, thinking very much the same way as you, talking the same language, having the same ideals of liberty and the same intense idealism, we Ulster people should welcome you Americans not because it was a duty, but because it was a pleasure. The greatest compliment you can pay us is to come back with your wives and children as soon as transport will allow. Not because you served here, but because you will be coming back to shake hands with your friends.
Yep. That's certainly the way it was. And not least on the day we left Ireland. Boy, I'll never forget that day either. I wasn't the only G.I. Joe saying goodbye to his wife and his sweetheart. There were plenty more like me. And if some of us took it hard, while others took it with a grin, well, there were not many of us didn't feel we were kind of leaving home all over again. There was a guy on the dock sitting around playing a lament or something on the Irish pipes, and while it was a nice thought, and no doubt very appropriate, well, it didn't seem to add to the gaiety of the occasion. Yes, ma'am. There were some kind of sad faces left on the Irish docks that day. And if it comes to that, there weren't many gay-looking guys on board ship. About the only satisfied customers around the joint were the seagulls, who weren't going anyplace, and the ship's officers, who were coming back. But in Ireland, the sun never hangs around for long and back of the clouds, and there's always some guy who knows when to change a tune. There was a bunch of girls we knew down from the Empire Theater in Belfast. And the old guy in the fisherman's hat made up his mind they were going to dance. First thing he had to do was get the piper off to a new start.
You come from Ireland, sure, it's certain you must know that when we have the hoolie, it's a real old-fashioned show. For a hoolie's not a picnic, nor a party, nor a ball, but it's all these three together, and an open door for all. Ah, night, hoolie, down and up the barrel door, sure the dancing was a visit, and the girls are perfect joy. The fiddlers never rested, and the fight was every shot, as the missus said, "Big up, oh sure, it's time you had a rock." Ah, sure, no one would deny it was an elegant appeal, and if the piper stopped and said the fiddler said a reel,